Hello everyone, I am Bradley Sward, Associate Professor of Computer and Information Science at the College of DuPage in Glen Ellen, Illinois. And this video today is going to look at a Legend of Zelda style original Nintendo NES style adventure game using GameMaker language using GameMaker Studio version 2.3. So let me show you what the end goal is of today's lesson. So here we have Link. Some of this should be very similar to you guys if you followed my other videos, and a few of it may not be. So I can have my character move around and he animates. Let me move the mouse cursor out of the way. And it's not necessarily important right now, but I do have it where you can use this sword. I'm saying that's maybe for a future lesson on how to use different states so the character can be in the walk state versus the attack state versus the damage state versus all the other states. And so the things that are a little different here is the camera. We're used to the camera following the player, basically, like the camera should be following him as he goes. But this is a little different. I'll show you how to code this so that all you have to do here is you go here and you go, oh, look at that. And the camera pans and follows you along. And every time you cross a room boundary, you go to the next room. And so it takes a little work, it takes a little extra effort, but once you do this, you do not have to create a brand new room every time you want to go from screen to screen. This is just one giant room that I am using some code and using some camera and viewport effects to get that behavior. So I have six separate little mini rooms inside of here, and I don't have anything else. This is just the get you going kind of part of making a Zelda-style adventure game. So like much of everything else I've done, the room itself is going to be running in 720p. We'll get to that in a second, but let me just show you all the sprites that I've done for this version here, at least the sprites that come to characters and the things moving around in our game world. So my wall, I just took everything and I upscaled everything to 40 by 40. Admittedly, it doesn't look as good as it could or it should because of the way the scaling has gone. But I have a wall sprite, I have a tree sprite, I haven't done anything with this, but I have something if I want to do a floor sprite, and I have animations for Link that goes, he walks fine with just 2 animation frames. I have the up animation, the right animation, the left and the down, and for this video I just have everything set up. Everything is 003939. Everything is full image when it comes to Link. And if you care, I just, when I stole these images from somewhere, and so the Link character is 40 by 70, but I made sure that if I'm going to use this thing, I want to make sure that the bounding boxes are the player, not necessarily the sword. We would add a secondary bounding box for the sword in all of the cases. But so it's basically 6 sprites make up the whole game. Well, 4 animations, 2 sprites. And so again, the character animates up, down, left, and right, no matter which way I'm going. And if you want to add, like I have spacebar for sword, you can go ahead and do that too. So that's all the sprites I necessarily have for the entire game demo here. The room, see again, there's only one room in here. And this is where I can start discussing, because this should not be too long of a video compared to a lot of other things, is that I have different layers here that I'm using and I'm using different room settings. Let me talk about the room settings first. You can see if I'm using 720p resolution, that's 1280 wide and 720 high. So what I have here is 1280 times 2, but my width is twice as much, so you can see my room is twice as big. And then I have a height of 2160, which is 720 times 3. So my entire room is made up of 6 little tiny sub-rooms. And so how do I do this? How do I make sure everything is perfectly legitimate when it comes to making sure that if I walk from one room to the next I don't slam into a wall or something like that? Is I have this little sprite called Dev Mode Sprite. And all it is a 720p resolution sprite, 1280 by 720, and I just have a border. I just put a border around. You can make it as thin or as thick as you want if you want to do this. This is just to make your lives easier when it goes to do level design. And what I do with this is I add a secondary background layer on top of everything else. And all it does is tile that image horizontally and vertically. And you're like, well, where is it? I have it invisible when the game plays. This is just for dev mode. And see, there it goes. And maybe black isn't the best color. You can do whatever you want. But you can see now, because it's tiled 720p style, that when I go here, the black boundary around this shows me where one little mini sub room ends and another one begins. So then, and basically then I can just fill in all the gaps and just make sure that when the character goes from here to there over this boundary line, oh, maybe the grid isn't set exactly like I thought it would. I don't know how that happened, but now you can see when I go over this boundary line, things are going to change. Or we haven't talked about that camera setting yet, or the movement itself. But but you can see that. And all I do is, if you can see it when you run the game, I believe you can, because it's right on the edge of everything. And yeah, you can see a little black boundary, at least at the top. Can you see that? It wasn't there a minute ago, I promise you that. Let me get it, but if I click this guy over here to make this invisible during gameplay, then yeah, it's hard. There's no more black boundary line up there. And you probably want that, because you don't want to see that black boundary as you're going from place to place. So I found over the years that, yes, this is so much easier than having room after room after room and trigger after trigger. If I touch this, go to this room. If I touch that, go to this room. For every single interaction from room to room, it just becomes way, way, way too tedious. Okay, so let's talk about Link. Let's look at our objects. I have a camera object, which we'll talk about last. Trees and walls are your normal fare. Trees and walls are solid, though, because you know me, if you know me enough from enough videos, I like my move contact solid function when it comes to all this stuff. And so, nothing special about it, just solid objects for both with no code in there. Link has some code. He doesn't have a ton. Let's see, create event. So I'm trying to make this a little more generic for you guys and whoever else is ever going to do this, maybe me included, so that if I ever want to add a different object type, I don't have to hard code all the different sprites. So I can say link down, link attack. I guess I didn't do this perfectly. I could have all sorts of different variables for this, which I don't right now. And the image speed is 0 because you don't want Link walking in place while he's not doing anything. He's not a speed runner. He is a marathoner. He is trying to save Zelda. And it's going to take a while. It's not going to take 9 or 10 seconds like a 100-meter dash. And so that is the create event. I said my sprite index is pointing down just to start. So, I mean, it is already, but it just to kind of get me thinking about what's going to happen. My sprite index is link down sprite already. And my attack sprite index is going to be link attack down sprite. And again, I started this out. I gave it a skeleton outline. So when I come back and revisit this, things will be, I'll be able to kind of fix things up the way I want. So there's the create event. And the step event, it looks complicated. Let me see if I can bring it down a notch so you can see a little bit more on the screen. And so it's not necessarily, it looks like a lot. Let me just, for the sake of argument here, let me get rid of all of the attack stuff since that's not necessarily important for this lecture video right here. And that simplifies things greatly, right? Okay, so what do? I can only move if any of the 4 arrow keys, I can only move in one direction at a time. And so there's no diagonal movement, and you can change this up whatever order. I'd have to go back and play my original Zelda. I have to go down to the basement and plug it in and turn it on to figure out which keys override which others in the real game. If I was going to try to 100% as best I could match up the real Nintendo game, because I know that Link doesn't go diagonally in the NES game. He does in Super Nintendo and Link to the Past and all that, but he definitely does not in the NES version. So if I try to go up at whatever speed. 4 is the speed I used. Image speed is 0.15. That's usually my go-to when it comes to animation speeds. I can tweak it right here. I don't have to, if I want to, I don't have to worry. And my speed is 4, so I go up, and then change the sprite. If I press down, go down, change the sprite. And again, remember these are move contact solids. In this case, because I'm not going 2 directions at once, I'm going cardinal up, down, left, and right. I don't have to use that move slide solid function that I've shown you and I've made in previous videos. This one works just fine. You don't have to add all that extra code to it. And so if I go left and change the sprite. If I go right, and I change the sprite. But if I haven't pressed any of those 4 keys, then stop. There's no move contact because there's no need to move because I'm not trying to move. And then basically put me back so I'm not running in place, set the image speed to 0. So put me in the idle frame for animation and give me idle movement of that animation so he's no longer running in place. And so you could, like I said, if you wanted to, you could hard code the 4 in here, but then once you have to change the number, maybe you have a speed up or something, like that, it gets impossible to do because you're going to be changing it in so many places. It's hard coded. And in this case, the image speed, I could put this in here as well. Boom, boom, boom. But it's duplicated code. There's no reason. Just set it up front and then change it if you need to. That just comes with experience as being a programmer sometimes. It's like sometimes an if and an else can be simplified by just setting the else case up front and then changing it if you need to with an if case. That's what we're kind of doing here. And my videos when it comes to assembly language programming and even some C++ programming, my other, my 150 or 200, my goodness, so many other videos that I've done for all my other courses, that kind of goes into a little more detail sometimes. And I don't know exactly, I don't recall which exact video that is. But that covers the entire movement of the character inside of the game. And so if I removed this camera object, then nothing would happen because I don't have any of the actual game. Let me just go in here and just show here. Let me just delete the little camera. Oh, I got to be in the instance layer. Delete the camera and go back in and play the game. And so the movement is not changed by this camera object, but obviously the camera is. And you can see now by just removing that code, the camera no longer follows my character. He's in there, he's walking around, but you can't see it because the camera is basically just locked onto the upper left-hand corner of the game. And so let's go ahead and look at that code right now. And let me put the camera object back in the room. And remember, I like to put it in the upper left-hand corner somewhere so it doesn't get lost. That's just my go-to conventional way of doing things. Again, let's take a look at the camera, and then we can call it a day. So before we look at the code real fast, let's just take a look again at the properties for the room settings. Remember again that I have 1280 times 2 for the width, and I've got 720 times 3 for the height. And this time around, I've enabled the viewports, and I have viewport 0, and I set up viewport 0 to be 720p, so the camera properties are 1280 by 720 for the camera, 1280 and 720 for the viewport, and then notice it's not following any particular object in my scene, and we noticed that when we went back earlier and moved around and the camera didn't follow the character at all. And now I placed my camera object back in here. So now there's two different ways we can go ahead and set this up. I tinkered with this. Let me show you this first way. And so this first way, the camera just immediately just runs to the next screen. Boom. And so you can do things both ways. You can have the camera pan, or you can just have the camera just basically match where it needs to go at any given time. So let me just show you this code. Camera. So the camera object is just in the room. All it has is a step event. There's really not too much code. Maybe the code is a little complicated the first couple times you think about it, but there's really not that much code. This is it. And say, don't mind this just yet. I'll put this code back in when we talk about panning the camera. And for this, we don't need this camera pan speed either. We just need this code right here. And so I need to be able to get the camera. I don't know why GameMaker made things more complicated when they moved over to version 2.1 or whatever it was, where they added the viewport system and now a camera system. It seems a little too much for what is needed to get to happen. All my years of using GameMaker, I didn't need any of that stuff, and now it's just more complicated. But I need to get the camera. The camera properties. You can see this over here. I need to get the specific camera that is tied to viewport 0, and that's what this is called, and I call it bare camera. So when this line of code executes, camera now maintains that object, a reference to that camera object. Okay, and so it doesn't necessarily matter until we get down here. I probably could actually just remove this and bring this down here, but just so you understand, I now have the camera. And so, okay, and I can use that. And now, how do I know what X and Y setting to set the upper left-hand corner? Because we're taking the camera, and what we're not changing the width, we're not changing the height of the camera, but we're changing where in the actual room the camera is facing, or what position. And X position, Y position is the upper left-hand corner of the screen, always. And so what I can do here is take link's x position, and what I do is I divide it by 1280. So I get some number. Somewhere, you know, and it'll have a fractional component. So it'll be like 1.2, or it'll be 6.9, or, you know, to think about it, right? I mean, it could be any number between, you know, between 0 and 1, or 0 and 1, or 0 and 2, and 0 and 3, but it can have fractional components. But I need to remove that fractional component, and that's what this thing does. Theoretically, link's x position will never be negative in our game, so we don't have to worry about this. But if you do, then you got to worry, but that's another video altogether. So I take the x value, and basically I'm just doing a cast to integer, if you want to think of it that way. This is the only way I know how to do it in GameMaker, is to just remove the fractional component. So like 1.65 will be reduced down to 1. Desired x will be reduced down to 1. The fractional component will be removed. It's a cast from float to int, or from double to int. And then what I can do is take that integer value, multiply by my room width, or my subroom. I guess we could, I have this a little hard-coded for now, I'll admit, for 1280 720p resolution, but then that brings it back. So if link was at 1800 or something like that, this would reduce down to 1 point something, this would reduce down to 1, and then this would bring it up to 1280, because we want the upper left-hand pixel to be at 1280. And so the same thing goes for the vertical component. Where is link vertically? Divide by 720, remove the fractional component, and then multiply it back, so you know the upper left-hand corner of this thing will be locked into a 720 pixel. What's the term for it? Let me find the room here. A 720 pixel. My goodness, why can't I? I'm thinking and talking and doing all the things. 720 pixel room. You get what I'm trying to say. That it's tied to, this is 0, 0 here, up here, and then this is 0, 720 down here. This is over right here. This one is 1280, 720. So it's tying it to grid settings. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm just grid set, like you know the grid settings here. Okay, so coming back to the camera. And then what do I do here is I say, camera, give me the camera that I just had, set the viewport to that desired X, that desired Y setting. So all of that comes together. And again, you could probably simplify this, but I like writing more code that's simple to read than lines of code that are just go on forever and you're like, what the hell's going on? So then you can see everything jumps from frame to frame, and it's all tied to link's X position and Y position in space. And so you can go, here he goes, he's walking, here we go. So you can see that now. And no matter what I do, as long as there's more rooms, I can do it. And what's interesting about this too is this isn't tied to GameMaker anymore. If I accidentally go off the screen, it'll take me off into places that don't exist inside my actual game room. I can see behind the curtain, like some of those videos that I see for all the video games. What happens when you go under the screen or over the screen or whatever. Anyway, so that is what you would do if you want the screen to go room to room and there's no panning effect. So now let me just comment this out and bring back this. And this is the code you would write instead if you want the camera to pan. Let me just prove it to you, and then I can describe it, and then we can all get on with our lives and go do other things. Okay, so there you go. Now the camera is panned, and what's cool about it is the speed of the pan is tied to this right here. I can make it go really slow, but I noticed 23 seemed to be a nice value. And this is basically what GameMaker is doing anyway when it does the object following. See how it's very, very slow? I think it's pretty cool. You can dictate how fast or slow you want the screen to pan. Let me put it back to 23. And so, okay. So what do I do this time? So now I have to know, before I just go, I don't care what the camera, where it was before, just put it to where I tell you. But now the camera, it totally matters where the camera is now compared to where I want it to be. And so these two lines of code get me these X and Y positions here. And again, these change while the game is going. It gets me the X position and the Y position of this specific camera tied to this specific viewport. And so now when I'm trying to do stuff, and it's the same code up here to figure out where do I want to actually go, but in any of the two cases here, if the X position I want to go to isn't the same as where the camera is, or the Y position isn't in the same position where the Y camera is, I basically run this fancy code to figure out which direction should I be moving the camera view to match. And again, it looks a little complicated, and you can look at this if you want to. And it takes into account negative camera speeds and positive camera speeds, but it just figures out, do I go like in this? Do I go left or right? Am I, like if I go off one way or the other, am I going left or am I going right? Or in this case, if I'm changing vertically, am I going up or am I going down? And this basically finds the difference between the two positions, and then it basically clamps the value between the camera pan speed. I can only go negative 23 or I can go positive 23, but it's a clamp, and because of that, it'll always lock on because I'm using the clamp function. So like at the worst case, if it's like 5 pixels apart or whatever, it'll go 5 pixels. But if it's like 175 pixels, it'll only go 23 pixels. So that's what this code does. It basically reduces down, okay, I know I need to move, but how much do I need to move? And then it'll figure out how much to go in the difference in X, the difference in Y, and then it will go ahead and say, hey, camera, like I was doing wherever up here, and I say, okay, take my current X and add this difference. Take my current Y and add this difference. And one last time here, just to show it off, you go, now it will always follow you. It will always lock on. It's always following the X and the Y position, and it's panning. And again, there's a lot of other things to worry about when it comes to this, especially with objects and enemies inside of each of these other sub-rooms, because right now every object inside this game would be still running at every frame, so we would have to change that around a little bit, but you kind of get the point. And so the camera follows, and that's it. That's what I wanted to show for this video, just to kind of get the basics going of just a Zelda-style adventure game and everything. I think it looks pretty good, all things considered. I mean, it's way too, there's way too much on the screen compared to the original Nintendo and all that, but you know what? Modern day requires modern day solutions. Okay, so that is our video. Thanks for sticking with me as always. So again, the Link character, very simple movement. We've probably seen this many times prior. And then just the camera view and this dev mode sprite is interesting when it comes to now we can lay down the room. We can lay out the room as we want without having to worry too much, because now I can see these boundaries and I don't have to worry too much. Anyway, so swardb@cod.edu is always a great way to get a hold of me. You can comment below or somehow get a hold of me otherwise, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. I don't do homework though. I've been getting more and more calls for homework. I'm like, no, I've done my homework over the years. That's your job, your responsibility, unfortunately. I can help you high level, but I'm not going to write your code for you. But anyway, thanks for sticking with it. I'm going to do a couple more videos when it comes to like top-down adventure games, but I'm probably going to make more of a something that uses controllers and this and that. Something a little more cool, because everything I've done so far is keyboard mouse based. I think it's time to start moving over into controllers and rotations and stuff like a true top-down adventure game. Well, thanks again, everybody. Have a great day. See you next time.